On This Week in Enterprise Tech, the FCC is trying to help broadband in rural areas. They actually created the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and there's some rules behind it, and it's not making some ISPs happy. We'll actually discuss their attempt. Plus, are you developing applications without code or no code? Well, if so, does that mean you're developing them without security too? Well, Curtis takes us through it. Plus, Curtis, Brian, and I talk with Thomas Ginter from Bandwidth about emergency services, 911 routing, and all the new laws that surround it. Try it on the set. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make it securing your employees simple and secure. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twyat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 375, recorded January 10th, 2020. Kari's Law is changing 911. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Guru. How do you find the answer to customer questions? Who are the top 10 competitors? What's the Wi-Fi password? Was it hard to answer those questions? Well, Guru thinks it should be easy to get the knowledge you need. They designed Guru to be your single source of truth. Try it free today at getguru.com/enterprise. And by Thinkst Canary. Detect attackers on your network while avoiding irritating false alarms. Get the alerts that matter. For 10% off and a 60-day money-back guarantee, go to canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT in the How Do You Hear About Us box. And by UStudio. UStudio hosts, manages, and distributes private podcasts in both audio and video format for businesses. Deliver corporate audio and video content securely to any device in a modern, mobile-first experience. Learn more at the letter U, studio.com. Welcome to Twyat, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Moreski, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. We need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, and what better way to start the new year with our very own geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chi, Director of Advanced Network Computing Laboratory in Honolulu. Chibert, Happy New Year, my friend.
Thank you very much. And I'll tell you, I've been cleaning up like crazy. The Advanced Network Computing Lab is being taken apart, and eventually the trademark and the domain and all that kind of stuff is going to be moving to some of my students at Leeward Community College.
Fantastic. But, you know, speaking of taking it apart, you're actually building up, too. I heard you were quite busy over the holidays. Is that right?
Yeah. We've been renovating the house. I've been building the infrastructure for a new undersea cable that's going to go out in January. This one's not going to be as deep. This is only going to be about 30 meters, but it's going to be right off Waikiki. And someday soon, we hope, we're going to be live streaming and start up a YouTube channel with a reef cam. So you'll be able to watch fishies off Waikiki.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, folks, we have not one but two experts in their field for this new year. And that's our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, Senior Editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, Happy New Year to you as well.
And the happiest of New Year's to you, Lou. It's great to be here on Twyat. Lots of fun things going on, and launching into the new year, of course, getting ready for the particular fun that will be the RSA conference at the end of February. So already looking forward to one of the great gatherings of the security clan.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for being here. It wouldn't be Twyat in this new year without you, definitely. But we do have a great show, so we have to get started. Not only are we going to say, hey, the FCC is trying to bring faster broadband to rural networks or rural areas. Will they actually succeed is the question. So we'll see. We'll get into that. Plus, if you're developing applications without code, are you also developing without security? Well, Curtis is going to walk us through that and what organizations are doing there. Plus, we have a really great guest, Thomas Ginter from Bandwidth, who's going to walk us through emergency services in the telecom industry and about distributed teams. But before we get into all that goodness, we do have to jump into this week's Blips. Now, you ever hear of big game hunting? Well, it refers to the targets of some of the latest ransomware campaigns that are out there. Now, they're essentially targeting enterprises by infiltrating the business network, gathering admin credentials, and using post-exploitation tools to encrypt the files on as many computers on the network as they can. Now, over the last year, there's actually been a large trend of enterprise targeting ransomware, which includes the likes of Ryuk, Bitpalmer, Doppler-Paymer, Sononiki, Maze, Megacortex, and Locker Goga. Now, if nothing else, they're taking on the market with these fake name words to the extreme. But we actually have seen a trend upwards of enterprise targets, which is there's new ransomware in the wild that will actually target all of the devices connected to your network. That's right. It's plainly dubbed Snake. Now, what do we know about Snake so far? Well, it's been discovered by the malware Hunter team, which is actually a V team, a virtual team, which is created on Twitter that exploits different attack types. And it was actually sharing that with SC Media's IT security expert, hacker, and reverse engineer Vitaly Kremez, who actually reversed engineered the ransomware. Now, based on his analysis, this ransomware is written in Golang, and it contains a much higher level of obfuscation that is commonly seen with these types of infections. What he found was there's actually a level of routine obfuscation not previously targeted in a lot of other ransomwares that are out there today. Now, when it started, Snake will remove the computer's shadow volume copies and then kill numerous processes related to SCADA systems, virtual machines, industrial control systems, remote management tools, network management software, and many more. Now, it then proceeds to encrypt the files on the device while skipping any of those located in the Windows system folder and various other system folders and files. Now, as it encrypts the files on the device, it skips a lot of other files that are related to hardware as well. Now, in each file that is encrypted, the Snake ransomware will append the word EKANS file marker shown below. Now, in the article there. Now, that's actually just Snake in reverse. But one interesting thing about this particular ransomware was that it takes a long time to encrypt a device because of how much it actually has to do. Now, when done encrypting, the ransom will create a ransom note in the desktop folder called fixyourfiles.txt. Now, this ransom note contains instructions to contact listed email address for payment instructions. Now, this email address is currently BAPCO crypt, BAPCO crypt at ctctemplar.com. Very interesting. Now, Snake seems to be only the first type of ransomware that's using a more general approach to encryption to ensure better scale across your network. Now, if nothing else, this is your chance to ensure security measures are in place and that you also have critical data and documents backed up on all your devices, including your workstations. Happy 2020.
Well, homomorphic encryption could change security, and a bank in Brazil is showing how it's done. Banco Bradesco, a prominent Brazilian financial institution, has for the past year been working with IBM Research to apply a technique called homomorphic encryption to banking data. The pilot showed that it was possible to apply machine learning algorithms to encrypted data without decrypting it, creating a new level of privacy that could be applied to other industries. Now, the idea behind homomorphic encryption, or HE, which is now emerging in real-life applications like this one, is to keep data encrypted while it's being processed. This type of cryptography was first proposed in the 1970s, but it wasn't until 2009 that IBM scientist Craig Ginter created the first fully homomorphic encryption system. HE is based on the mathematics of lattices, and researchers say protects the confidentiality of data from complex attacks, even those by quantum computers. Now, with HE, these machines can perform computations while the data is encrypted, and as a result, the entity can act on data without gathering or storing any sensitive information. HE won't prevent data breaches, but it will prevent data thieves from grabbing usable information since decryption isn't taking place. Now, banking isn't the only industry where HE can be applied. Industries like government and healthcare, where data privacy is a top priority, could also benefit from the use of HE. While those applications come along, IBM Research will continue to work with Banco Bradesco to apply HE on financial data.
Well, this story talks about how a judge is backing Reveal's suit to end secrecy around Silicon Valley's lack of diversity. A federal judge this last Tuesday struck down attempts by the U.S. Department of Labor and several major Silicon Valley firms to keep companies' staff diversity numbers secret, siding with the argument made by Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting that the records are not confidential business information. Magistrate Judge Candace A. Westmore of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California ordered the federal agency to disclose the diversity reports filed with the government by 10 tech companies in response to Reveal's Freedom of Information Act request. Reveal filed suit in federal court after the Labor Department denied the FOIA request. The judge found that government attorneys failed to show that the diversity reports, called EEO-1s, are commercially confidential information. They also failed to show the records being released would result in financial harm that was foreseeable. The tech companies seeking to keep their diversity report secret are Oracle America Incorporated, Box Incorporated, Fitbit Incorporated, Applied Materials Incorporated, Equinix Incorporated, Gilead Sciences Incorporated, Synopsys Incorporated, DocuSign Incorporated, Agilent Technologies Incorporated, and Xilinx Incorporated. The ruling has far-reaching consequences, signaling that EEO-1 diversity reports for all large federal contractors should be accessible through FOIA requests. Whether the report should be public has been the subject of debate for decades and the subject of FOIA battles by journalists since at least 2008. The records show the breakdown of a company's workforce by race, gender, and broad job category. This is one of those stories that make you go, what happened to all those pretty words on equal opportunity employment?
Now, we have seen quite the trend in large acquisitions over the last year in many different sectors of the industry. In fact, Salesforce was acquiring Tableau, Disney acquiring Fox, Microsoft acquiring GitHub, and many more. Now, many of these are considered as part of the greater strategy to bring even more value to the stockholders. Well, with all these going around, it wouldn't be a surprise if I told you that Google could acquire Salesforce. That's right. According to RBC Capital Markets, the analysts believe that Google could buy Salesforce as just as much chump change or discounted price of $250 billion. In fact, that would be at a premium of 79 or 70% of its actual current market cap. Now, how could a Google afford it? Well, all they had to do is to spin off its cloud business into a standalone company, valuing it as much as $226 billion, and use a little cash there. But what would it do for Google is the interesting fact here. Well, it would allow them to actually take a leap forward in the cloud race and have it almost slide into the second spot next to Amazon in the cloud race. Now, Salesforce being a cloud platform and a large CRM service, Google could benefit greatly from the different assets it has to offer. That's not it, though. In fact, to boost Google's efforts in the hybrid cloud, it could acquire a company called Nutanix, pay as much as $10.1 billion, well over the company's current market cap of $6.3 billion. Now, this analysis actually came after Goldman Sachs reported a slight decline in Google's cloud usage over the past year. Google is by far the number 3 cloud player. Now, Gartner most recently estimated AWS at a 47.8% market share in 2018 compared to Microsoft's 15.5%. Now, Google is down to 4%. Now, what do you think? Is Google up to the challenge? We'll have to see what the stock market does with this as soon as it hits the wind.
Well, Amazon Web Services has issued an urgent warning for database users to update their certs. AWS has issued an important warning to users of its Amazon Aurora, Amazon Relational Database Services, and Amazon Document DB with MongoDB compatibility databases, urging them to update their certificates by January 14. Those who use SSL TLS certificate validation when they connect to database instances are urged to download and install a fresh certificate, rotate the certificate authority for the instances, and reboot those instances. Now, if you're not using certificates, there's not such a sense of urgency about the change. On a related note, if you're not using certificates, what are you thinking? Encrypt your traffic. Now, that AWS is going through is standard. SSL TLS certificates for RDS, Aurora, and DocumentDB expire and are replaced every 5 years as part of standard maintenance. Instances created on or after January 14 will have the new C2019 certificates, which were made available in September of 2019.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have a fairy tale to share with you. New York City Broadband plans calls for fiber everywhere, with ISPs sharing the network. Yeah. The New York City government has released an internet master plan that calls for universal broadband throughout the 5 boroughs, relying on open access fiber networks that can be used by multiple ISPs. The plan, announced by Mayor Bill de Blasio and Chief Technology Officer John Paul Farmer yesterday, says New York City will, quote, prioritize and optimize open access or neutral host infrastructure, which can be shared by multiple operators to lower cost, increase competition, minimize physical disruption to the city, and incentivize private sector investments to reach and serve customers, unquote. The New York City wants to ensure universal access to both wired and mobile internet with a fiber network that offers home internet and provides bandwidth to mobile services. They're saying, quote, based on the data and analysis contained in this master plan, the city has determined that universal broadband calls for an open access fiber optic infrastructure built out to nearly every street, intersection with an aggregation point in every neighborhood. Leveraging city real estate assets and public rights of way will allow network operators to extend fiber optic infrastructure from the intersection to a pole or building and deliver service using any number of potential technologies. The new infrastructure will support the rapid and equitable deployment of multiple choices for service. My comment on this is best of luck fighting the monster money involved with networks in New York City. Don't get me wrong. I would love for this groundbreaking precedent to happen. I'm just not going to hold my breath.
Well, we all know that batteries are a fire hazard, right? Well, airlines barely want you on board nowadays with your phone. Well, researchers might have a solution to you and your organization woes. That's right. Scientists have made a nearly invincible lithium-ion battery. Now, you're wondering, how invincible may it be? Well, it could be cut, bent, soaked, shot, and lit on fire, and it still powers up just fine. Sounds like something out of an infomercial, but we all know that lithium-ion has a reliance on toxic flammable materials, which means that the smallest defect can actually result in exploding gadgets. Now, a team of researchers led by physicists at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory believe that they have a safer battery for you. Now, what's the secret? Well, to make an indestructible battery, it has to come down to its electrolyte. That's the actual chemical mixture that separates the positive and negative ends of the battery. Now, when you use a lithium-ion battery, its charged lithium-ion particles travel through a barrier in the electrolyte from the anode and to the cathode, where they undergo a chemical reaction and it actually produces energy. Now, most lithium-ion electrolytes are actually a mixture of flammable lithium salts and toxic liquids, which means that in today's lithium-ion chemistry, you have a recipe for a disaster or a fire. Now, if the permeable barrier that separates the cathode from the anode crumbles, it actually creates a short circuit and a whole lot of heat. Now, with all this heat, it's actually highly flammable material like lithium-ion electrolyte next to oxygen-rich cathode in the battery. You got a flaming electronic device on your hands. Now, aqueous batteries avoid all of these problems with electrolytes that are water-based and therefore both non-flammable and actually non-toxic. Now, by increasing the concentration of lithium salts and mixing the electrolyte with a polymer, a material resembling a very soft plastic, researchers can bump the electric potential from around 1.2 volts up to 4 volts, which is actually comparable with commercial lithium-ion batteries today. Now, during tests, the team has submerged the device in salt water, cut it with scissors, used an air cannon to simulate a ballistic impact, and lit it on fire. And through each one of these tests, the battery actually kept pumping out electricity. And after one trial by fire, the charred portion that was cut off actually continued to operate normally for about 100 hours. Now, if you're wondering about the future of batteries, EVs, and other battery-powered devices, you may have just heard it's possible fortune. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get there, we have to thank a great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Guru. Now, whether you're a startup or a large enterprise, Guru can help your team or company find the information they need to do their job. Now, information could be hard to find and it's often disorganized, right? Well, Guru is a solution that unifies your company's knowledge and acts as a single source of truth by putting the right knowledge into your employees' hands and exactly the right time within their workflow. Now, the knowledge you need to do your job finds you so you don't have to search for it. That's right. I've seen organizations actually use Guru, and it actually surfaces what they need for each one of the departments that need it. And knowledge bases are important, right? Well, the before and after for customers actually puts the stake in your customers and puts the stake in your organization. And your team needs to have the most up-to-date information that's consistent and constant across everyone, right? While making it sure that everyone is on the same page for teams in multiple offices is hard, and that's where Guru steps in. Imagine that type of power integrated with your other workflows. Like, for instance, if you're using Slack or Microsoft Teams. And in fact, it has a ton of integrations. And all you have to do is ask a question to Guru, and it'll find it for you from all the information that your organization has provided. Now, take another example, Shopify's customer support. Now, they knew they needed a solution that actually lived within the support team's existing workflows that would help them find the answers they needed efficiently. Now, they turned to Guru, and now it uses it over 60% of all support interactions, whether it's sales, marketing, product knowledge management, and more. Now, the company Boomi was able to use and see Guru and fit it into their team's daily workflow. And now when Paul, Boomi's sales enablement leader, actually made it a point to load a few of their RFP responses into Guru, his aha moment was actually getting emails from his reps and sales engineers saying, hey, Guru helped them actually answer an RFP proposal much faster. It actually has a powerful browser extension there as well. And it brings up-to-date knowledge verified by your team's experts right into your workflow. It includes integrations with Slack, Salesforce, Zendesk, Gmail, Intercom, and more. And get this, Guru adds and uses AI to make your team more productive as well. It actually proactively suggests relevant information based on wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whatever you're working on. And it uses AI to actually help you create amazing customer experiences and close those deals. Now, best of all, it gives your team confidence by reassuring that they're using the most up-to-date information. Prevent distractions, access, and create knowledge without ever leaving your screen. Go to getguru.com/enterprise today and try Guru for free. That's getguru.com/enterprise. And we thank Guru for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the Bites, where we bring you the recent enterprise stories from the week and give you our take on them. And the first one is no surprise with the current trends coming out of the Office of FCC. Now, it's not a secret that AT&T, Frontier, Windstream, and their industry lobby group are fighting against higher internet speeds and U.S. subsidiary programs for rural areas without good broadband access. Now, however, it seems that the FCC is trying for a plan to actually figure things out here. Now, the Federal Communications Commission plan for the next version of its rural broadband fund actually sets 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits for upload as their baseline tier. Now, ISPs seem to be on board with the baseline level for that plan called the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Now, the providers are not too excited about the next part here. Now, listen to this. The FCC plans to distribute funding for 2 higher speed tiers as well, namely an above baseline level, which is actually 100 megabits per second down and 20 up, and a gigabit performance tier of 1 gigabit per second down and 500 megabit up. Now, it's the above baseline tier, which is that 100 megabit, 20 megabit down, that providers object to, and they either want the FCC to lower that tier upload speed or create an additional tier that would be faster than baseline but slower than the above. Now, FCC's chairman Ajit Pai has portrayed the $2 billion per year fund goal as modernizing rural broadband by bringing up to gigabit speeds to remote corners of the nation. Now, companies are pushing lower standards and trying to ensure ISPs are offering much slower speeds and actually get large slice of the federal funding without making significant network upgrades. Now, the above baseline tier here is interesting because upload targets should be around 10 megabits per second instead of 20 megabits, according to the FCC filing on December 23rd by Frontier, Windstream, and a lobby group of U.S. Telecom. Now, the providers at U.S. Telecom claim that the 20 megabit upload speeds wouldn't benefit rural consumers much. Let's question there. Now, the two groups, the problem with the previous argument is that they advertise speeds in the U.S. are basically the best case scenario, right? Well, that's you basically say, hey, it's usually up to speeds. Now, consumers of these certain speeds, but often they get less than that, right? Well, if the providers succeed in getting the significant funding for that 10 megabit upload speeds, consumers can end up getting actual speeds in the single digits. Ugh. Now, two groups that represent similar ISPs, or smaller ISPs, actually urge the FCC to reject the calls for slower speeds. That's interesting. Now, the NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, and ACA Connects, formerly the American Cable Association, actually asked for this. Now, I want to bring my co-host in because this is interesting. I want to get their take on this. I want to start with Cheebert. Cheebert, first question to you. Now, this plan that the FCC has, let's just take away all the lobbyists for now and just talk about what they're trying to do here. Do you think that these requirements will actually push things forward if they keep them the way they are?
One would seriously hope they would. I'm going to toot the horn of the WISP organization for a little bit. That when I was talking to a lot of the wireless internet service providers, they were all of the opinion that, gee, why are the big boys fighting against this? They've got fiber. We have wireless, and we have to go and really get careful on how we aim our antennas and what frequency to use and so forth. The vast majority of WISPs already provide that as the second tier. In fact, a lot of WISP are offering 100 meg symmetrical for way less than a lot of these big boys are offering. So yeah, something like this needs to happen. The large ISPs have been getting a lot, I mean a metric lot of funding from the federal government, and yet they're still fighting the growth potential. When we start having a lot of people that need to do things like upload videos of baby's first steps, or I want to have a Skype session with grandma, those low single-digit upload speeds aren't going to cut it anymore. And so I don't blame the FCC. This is actually something I agree with, that the upload speeds especially are way too low, and the second tier does need to be higher, and there's a really good reason for it. And the big ISPs are just trying to preserve their bottom line.
Yeah, so I agree. I think they're actually doing something good here. Now, I want to throw this over to Kurt. Curtis, with all this pressure from all the lobbyists and all the big telecoms out there, what do you think? Are they going to hold their ground? They're going to keep that tier the same?
I'd like to think they are, but I would love for the FCC to show some backbone here. And I think there is probably a, call it 60% chance that they will do so. But I've learned never to completely underestimate the power of a whole bunch of lobbyists waving big checks in the air. This is, as Cheebert said, the protests against this are all about the large incumbents wanting to maximize the return on their legacy investments, not having to renew their investment in bandwidth updates before the previous investments were completely written off. I think it's charming the way they are positioning this as protecting the small ISP. They're really interested in allowing smaller players, these upstarts, mom and pop ISPs, if you will, coming in with baskets full of baseballs and apple pie to bring low bandwidth broadband to the masses. But the truth is, this is all about a handful of incumbents wanting to maximize their returns and really depriving the vast majority of the physical United States of the kind of bandwidth that most of the rest of the developed world takes for granted.
Makes sense. Now, the interesting thing here is that last comment that I gave, which was the fact that some of the smaller ISPs out there are actually urging the FCC to keep it the same way, keep these tiers actually defined the same way. Cheebert, I want to throw this to you. Why are the smaller guys asking to keep it this way?
Small ISPs well, let's get to the bottom line. Small ISPs feed into larger ISPs. And so some of the things that I've been seeing is that the large ISPs are actually making it harder for the small guys to get increased bandwidth. So like on my WISP, getting a gig wasn't that hard. But the problem I'm having is, how do I jump to the next step? Well, the next step with the big ISPs has always been 10 gig. I need something in between. So because of that, I've got to go as a small ISP and try and chop up my collision domains much finer. So I actually need a little bit of elbow room, shall we say, in my pricing, so that I can have, shall we say, a few more steps for my customers. Because remember, if you sell a customer, say, a 100 meg down and 10 up, and they only get 9 meg up, they're going to start burning up my support lines and say, hey, where's that last meg? That's why everybody goes and says up to. The reality is, and the reason why I love what New York City is doing is by eliminating that middleman and providing a city-owned next tier ISP. That means I'll be able to have the smaller guys being able to afford and have the granularity so that they can buy a 5 gig link. So it'll be physically connected as a 10 gig, but they'll be more likely to be able to get, say, a throttled 10 gig down to a 5 gig, so that we don't have to invest quite so much until we have a bigger customer base. Because remember, no matter how nice this all sounds and how wonderful and how much of a storybook this is, it's people still have to make money. And so we're going to need some elbow room. I think the FCC is doing some good things. I think in rural America, we're going to need a little bit more leeway to be able to play. So I think we're going to need some elbow room. I think we're still going to need to have the FCC and the federal government pushing on people, because without the investments, we're not going to be able to grow. And the new applications, remember, video conferencing, the so-called video telephone, is a very, very, very new thing. I remember, seeing World's Fair, and I actually remember going to Epcot many, 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 many years ago and seeing this really cool experimental thing called a video telephone. Well, that science fiction is real, but it took us 20, 30 years to get there. So I'm hoping that if the FCC continues pushing, and especially on our upload speeds, we might start getting some more interesting things. I really, really, really want to see more telemedicine happening. It's starting to happen, but it's still not quite there. I want to start seeing maybe some VR stuff happening. A lot of this isn't going to happen without additional bandwidth. So I guess my bottom line is, go FCC. Thankfully, you're actually doing something that I think is good for the market. I think the ISPs are just going to have to really and truly get rolling and see if we can actually do something really good for the consumer this time.
I agree. Hopefully it is not science fiction that this will go forward, but we'll have to see what comes up next. Well, folks, let's jump into the next bite. Now, low-code and no-code solutions are actually pretty big out there. They're actually gaining in traction, Power Apps, and more. Now, Curtis, does this mean organizations are going into developing their applications without security, too?
Well, Lou, that's really the question of the moment. There's no question at all that low-code and no-code development frameworks are becoming bigger parts of enterprise development, both from the standpoint of the enterprise software development teams and the business units, who often put these no-code frameworks in the hands of subject matter experts so they can develop line of business applications without having to go through all of the well, let's call it overhead of enterprise software development efforts. The real question is whether these frameworks, whether they're content management systems like WordPress or large enterprise application builders like Appian, can build applications that are both as functional as those that come from traditional development efforts and as secure as those who come from the traditional environments. Now, business unit developers typically will not have the kind of security background that enterprise application, at least in theory, do have. You know, I talked to people for this article who said that the onus really is on the enterprise application developers until the application development effort gets down to the business unit. And in that case, the onus moves to the framework developers. And what I'm asking is whether those application framework developers are up to the challenge. Now, in many ways, they can be. You know, let's think about things like input validation. This is something that gets a lot of applications in trouble when it doesn't happen properly, because attackers can use that improper validation to get commands, SQL injection attack, and other things into the application because it's not properly validated. In theory, at least, the no-code and low-code frameworks take care of that for you because their developers do know what's happening. Now, many people we talked to said that one of the keys in making sure that the applications developed through these are secure is looking at the visibility into the code that's developed and traceability of the data that goes through the application. Now, this can be especially true when it comes to compliance, because those compliance auditors are going to want to be able to trace what happens step by step by step through the application. Now, one of the things that is unquestionable is that an organization that's using no-code and low-code is entering into a partnership with that platform developer for security. You have to be able to trust that they are doing what they say they're doing and that it's up to snuff. So that may mean some very hard questions that's asked of those framework developers. And one of the flags that should go up is if the application framework developer isn't willing to have the conversation. But the big thing is, many people have said, making sure that you have someone in the organization who is responsible for making sure that the applications developed are secure. Now, whether this is someone out of the security team, out of the enterprise IT team, or out of some other team entirely, doesn't matter. What does matter is the charter and the authority to look at applications, talk to the application developers, whether they're writing in traditional code or pulling icons around in a no-code environment, making sure that the structure and flow of the application is secure, and making sure that any of those partnerships that are invoked result in a more secure application. I'm eager to talk to my co-hosts on this because they both have great insight into this. And Chibert, I'm actually going to come to you first. I know that you have looked at a lot of no-code and low-code platforms, especially when it comes to IoT. Do you feel that these have done anything to take the pressure of security off the individual application developer and put it in the hands of the team that has developed the no-code framework?
Okay, yeah, I'm going to say definitely yes. So I'm really high on NodeRED, which is actually backed by IBM. Now, the caveat is the modules, the nodes that come from IBM and their development partners, for the most part, have been really stunningly good and quite secure. They actually spew out, if you want, you can actually look at the actual code it generates and audit it. Now, the problem is some of those don't have enough imagination, shall we say. And people that use NodeRED will then have to seek modules from the community, just like I did. Like, for instance, I wanted to be able to go and grab stuff from the Seed Laboratories, their WIO platform. Those were not really available from IBM. Those had to come from Seed Labs. So there was a bit of distrust as I started digging into that. And then, when you start having, Joe Schmo on the street producing NodeRED nodes, you start wondering. So it's, again, just like when you start dealing with Python or C or, heck, back in my days, Fortran and COBOL, the people that provided the extra libraries, you're hoping that their reputation also comes with those, and that, say, like, for instance, when I was using the SPSS modules for my Fortran code, that it was vetted and it was actually secure. I think the same things are going to happen. Doesn't matter whether you're running Python or C or C++ or C# versus NodeRED or Cayenne or whatever. It's where did the modules come from? Have the actual modules been vetted? That's going to be the problem. And I think no matter what, no-code and low-code applications are sneaking in the back door, just like PCs did originally in the very, very early 80s, that superseded traditional glassroom computing. Low-code, no-code is going to change. It's going to be coming no matter what, because we can't afford to have traditional DevOps teams for everything, especially if it's something that's a short-term project. So things are going to have to change. And we're going to have to start seeing these modules being vetted by the framework builders.
Well, I want to take that issue about the framework builders and turn to Lou. Lou, from your perspective, do you see overall application security as perhaps getting better if it's left in the hands of these framework builders, in the same way that some people have said that application security is better on cloud platforms because we can trust the large cloud providers to have more security expertise than the average small to mid-sized company? Where do you come down on that? And is there any way that you can think of to sort of assure yourself that the framework that you're choosing is capable of producing secure code?
Great question, Curtis. I think there's a couple parts to this. The first part being that, yes, a lot of these kind of no-code, low-code solutions or platforms out there are built on existing cloud infrastructure that's already out there. Like, for instance, obviously I'm very familiar with Power Apps. It's built on Azure infrastructure. It's part of the Azure team. So a lot of the back-end systems, like the CDS data system, is built on, Azure infrastructure. So the security that you have and the reliability that you have there kind of gets also overlapped with the Power Apps system as well. But that's interesting because there's lots of other ones that, like you said, Appian is out there as well, and they offer a lot of different ways to ensure your organization's secure. Now, the way to tell, if you're not familiar with any of these, the way to tell is you look at things like, what kind of industry certifications do they guarantee? Some of them support SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, FedRAMP, HIPAA. There's a ton of them out there. And, if you know that these platforms support those things, you can at least feel a little bit more comfortable that they're taking it seriously. Now, some of them actually give you more tiers, more capabilities that deal with security. Like something like Appian will actually offer the ability to, actually create a secure private network that allows you to have strong algorithms and data encryption and isolation on that as well. So again, they're offering a lot of extra solutions here that allow your organization to secure things. And I think that just by going towards standards, as well as whether they're built on existing technology that's kind of known for their security and known for their reliability, you can feel a little bit more comfortable about using them. Now, some of the smaller companies out there, some of them don't publicize it. Like I've gone and looked at TrackVia or Nintex before, and some of them are smaller and they don't necessarily advertise some of the security measures that they offer. They'll say, hey, we offer role-based security and that kind of thing, which is really just authorization type things. And so it's kind of hard to tell, but they're doing better at advertising what they can do. So again, stick with standards, and that's where your best place to start is for sure.
Well, there's no question that we're going to see more and more of these no-code and low-code platforms being used by enterprise and business unit developers because they help with speed. And as we all know, speed has become the currency of enterprise IT. Companies are going to want to use this. So we'll be talking about it more in the future. Before we do that, though, it's time to continue with the rest of this week's Twiat. Lou, turn it back to you to take us forward into our next segment.
Thank you, Curtis. That's right. Before we get to my favorite part of the show, we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twiat Riot. We have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's thanks to Canary. Now, we all know the hackers take the path of least resistance, right? Well, I always say that your organization's only as good as your weakest link. And guess what? Your weakest link is your users. That's right. And get this fact. On an average, it takes about 191 days for a company to actually realize that they've had a data breach. Now, get ready because Thanks Canary has a great solution that will make it easy for you to catch breachers in the act. Now, you and I hear about new breaches every day, and they're trending upwards. Companies spend millions of dollars on IT security, but still don't know when they're actually compromised. Now, take Marriott Hotels. 500 million guests were affected by their breach in a 4-year period. That's crazy. Now, that's where Thanks Canary steps in. These honeypot appliances are super awesome. They sprinkle a couple of those things on those devices on your network, and when there's actually a breach, you'll be alerted immediately. Now, back in the early 2000s, people talked about using honeypots, but they weren't easy to deploy and set up and use. Now, Canary has made this simple with zero administration managing overhead. Now, Canaries can be set up in under 4 minutes, and within minutes of configuring, these devices will actually look identical to things like routers, to a switch, to a NAS server, to a Linux box, a Windows server, or workstation. Attackers can't tell the difference between these things. Now, the company behind Canaries has been fighting back in the security game for over 2 decades. Now, they're training companies, militaries, governments on how to break into networks, and they've used that experience to build Canary. Now, you might think, well, hackers are going to know these things are honeypots. They're going to stay away from them. Not at all. Thanks Canaries, they actually look valuable to the attacker, and you can actually put fake files on them. You can even enroll them in Active Directory, so they look like real devices, real workstations. Now, these devices add extreme value to your fight against security breaches. Not only are they getting a great value, but they are also licensed annually. Now, if they break down during that year, Thanks will actually just replace them. Now, since they're priced well, you can start with a few and scale them up over time. Now, some of the largest organizations in the world use Canaries on their network. I think it's time that you get that value too. Visit canary.tools/twit. For just $7,500 per year, you'll get 5 Canaries. You're on your hosted console, upgrade, support, and maintenance. And if you use code TWIT in the How to Hear About Us box, you'll get 10% off the price for life. We all know you'll love the Thanks Canary, but if you're not happy with them, you can always return the Canaries with their 2-month money-back guarantee for a full refund. That's canary.tools/twit, and enter the code TWIT in the How to Hear Us box. And we thank Canary for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now my favorite part of the show. We actually bring a guest in to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. And today we have Thomas Ginter, Solution Sales Engineer at Bandwidth. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much. Good to be here.
Now, Thomas, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about today, our audience loves to hear origin stories. They love to hear people's journey through tech. Can you maybe tell us about your journey through tech and how you ended up at Bandwidth?
Sure. I was an electrical engineer before I even knew what the term meant. I remember setting an electrical train set on fire when I tried to replace the transformer as a 12-year-old. I was much more successful later on in my career. Began with Novotel Communications up in Canada, and that really began my experience in the wireless mobile industry. And we stepped into 911 when we discovered it didn't work for mobile phones around 1992-93. I chaired some of the standards that resulted in the technologies that you're still using today every time you make a 911 call on a mobile phone. And so really that technology evolved through the 90s and into the 2000s, and then we, in 2005, had some FCC rules on voice over IP. Again, used the same standards and baseline. Had some very exciting work with Verizon Wireless, rolling out their first national text to 911 system in 2013, 2014, and some very interesting work on next-gen 911. And most recently, of course, we've got some interesting changes on the enterprise side, and that'll be the RABOMS Act and Kari's Law that we'll talk about today.
Fantastic. Well, one of the topics that we wanted to get into today is, like you're saying, emergency services, and it's a really large part of the telecom industry today. Before we get into all of the kind of the recent changes that have been going on, can you maybe take us through the current landscape, now what technologies are being used in this space? What are some of the laws to date around this area that guide these technologies?
Sure. So let's focus on the enterprise. We could talk a lot about the vendor community, next-gen 911, what public safety is doing, but really the 911 call starts with the enterprise, their phone systems, whether they're on-prem or cloud-based. Again, Kari's Law, RABOMS Act, there's several aspects here. Do you want me to go through them now, or do you want to throw up that one picture?
Yeah, go ahead, and we can throw the picture up when you feel free to go through it for sure.
Sure, I'll just step through it because it's a monologue. It's about 90 seconds long, but it begins with three rules within these two pieces of legislation that come into effect here on February 16th. The first piece of it is the dial digits 911. Everyone knows the dial digits 911, but now for the first time we have a federal law that says 911 must be able to be dialed natively and in its pure form on every device inside of an enterprise phone system. So you can't have an 8 to get an outside line and then dial 911. That's prohibited. It has to be straight 911. And the call can't go, for example, to a front desk or a security desk on its way to public safety. It has to go straight through, cut through to public safety. That's the first piece. The second piece is notifications. Again, in an enterprise, multi-story building, multi-building campus, a notification now has to be set. It's mandatory that it goes to a security desk or a security officer or multiple people who will prepare the facility for the reception of first responders. The third, and what I think is the most important piece, is the rules around dispatchable location. That's with a capital D and with a capital L within the rulemaking. Dispatchable location must get down to the 911 people, down to the 911 call center. And it starts with the street address of the building, but it also must include things like floor level, suite level, or even room level information as appropriate to get first responders to where they need to render assistance within that facility. You get the question, what should I do as a enterprise phone system manager, as the multi-line telephone system manager? Well, the three things you should do is, one, talk to your legal folks, talk to your attorneys. These are rules that are right in front of us. They are mandatory. So don't take my word for it. Check out with your own legal teams. These are complex rules. You're going to have to walk through them. Number two, figure out who inside of your facilities are going to receive that 911 notification. It has to go somewhere, a security desk, a team, your compliance officer, so that a business can take appropriate actions again to respond to the event that's underway. Last but not least, test the system. You're going to go through as an enterprise this work to provision dispatchable location in an accurate way, so test it. And there's many ways that you can test this without bombarding 911 calls on public safety. But these are really the basics. Digits, dispatchable location, notifications, and having the people prepared to receive it. I often get one question when you show the picture of me in front of the fire truck, and so I'll give you the answer to it, which is they didn't let me drive it.
That's too bad, because that would have been awesome. But there are some questions I have, especially around the fact that a lot of organizations out there today, they use a lot of different separate services that potentially need a direct stream to emergency services. Like, for instance, you might give an example of, like, now Netgear's Arlo systems. There might be an emergency or a fire or somebody breaking in that need kind of a direct line of sight, line of audio to like an emergency service. How can organizations set this up? Where can they go? What can they do? What's the best course of action for them?
Sure. So the first thing when you ask your question that you really need to separate out is that a service like Netgear's Arlo is not a 911 service, meaning Arlo and Netgear are not required to take a call and have it be able to be connected to 911. They're doing that as a value-added service offering because of their security camera line. Whereas a phone company that's providing dial tone or providing you with a telephone number that can do inbound and outbound, what the FCC defines as a two-way connected voice over IP service, they're required to do 911, and these laws that I just mentioned pertain to them, but not Netgear. I don't know if that helped.
Absolutely. Now, the interesting thing is you talked a little bit about some of the changes that were happening, especially in the law and the FCC ruling. Now, how is this going to affect the consumer as well?
Yeah. So the idea behind the FCC making these laws is that the consumer is utterly unaffected. Now, 911 has value because of its profound simplicity of use. Old rotary phones could do it. Touch tone phones could do it. Once we started to get into amps and TDMA and 2G phones, we fixed it so that they would work. You step into voice over IP, smartphones, voice over LTE, video calling, text to 911, real time. All of these services, the individual citizen goes, oh, I need to contact 911. I hit the digits 911, or I text the digits 911, and it should be that simple. And it's on the vendor community to make it remain that simple. And in this case now, on the enterprise community to properly provision the information that renders the service that useful to the citizen.
Got it. Now, the interesting thing here is there are a lot of things can go wrong here, right? Because could be an IT person that's managing, a telecom service in your organization, and where can organizations start to look and to ensure that they have the right setup? They have the right settings, that kind of thing.
Sure. So, of course, our organization can assist with that, but it's not easy. So if you have an enterprise, for example, that has, and I'll say some brands, but I'm not advocating any brands. If they have got an Avaya fixed phone system coupled to a on-prem Skype for Business system to do some virtual workers, but they've also got, for example, some Jabber clients that are wandering around the building. There might be a different 911 technique, classic voice over IP 911 solutions for the Avaya, what's called a next generation SIP-PITA flow solution that would be for the Skype for Business on-prem. And then the Jabber client might actually use something that we call an emergency calling API, or a Twilio-like solution that doesn't require voice over IP connectivity whatsoever. So what I'm saying is that it's becoming hybridized.
Right. Makes sense. Well, when we come back, because we do want to get more into this, I want to bring my co-host back in as well. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the integrations that can happen here, and of course, how can bandwidth help, of course, there as well. But before we do want to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is UStudio. Now, I think it's safe to say that you like staying informed through shows just like This Week in Enterprise Tech, right? Well, you are definitely not alone. In fact, 44% of Americans turn to podcasts for their news and information. And with those kind of numbers, it's no wonder that businesses want to leverage this medium for their workforces as well. Well, if your business is ready, UStudio is your answer. Now, UStudio hosts, manages, and distributes private podcasts and videocasts for your businesses. Now, it gives your organization a unique and effective way of communicating across the board. Now, it lets you deliver confidential information securely to your people whether they're employees or part of your remote workforces, customers, or partners. Not only that, but UStudio is fully customizable, allowing you to add your company's logo and colors just to look kind of integrated into your current workflows as well. Now, we all use email to communicate, but it's true. Sometimes people ignore them or don't always get all the context from them. UStudios show that audio and video formats are up to 500% more effective than text. Now, to see how easy it is to start your impact in your organization, UStudio can be implemented in hours, not months, and actually provide detailed analytics along the way. And with this data, you can know who's engaging in what and when and how often. Now, think about all the ways your company can actually utilize a private podcast or videocast from UStudio. You can actually share weekly messages from CEOs or management. What about onboarding remote workforces? This is actually a perfect medium for that process as well. Plus, it's a creative and effective way to spread company news on product updates and anything else you find important. Now, the other great thing about UStudio is actually focuses on privacy and security as well. We got to focus on that. Now, in today's climate, all organizations are thinking about that. Now, UStudio ensures your confidential business information is never discoverable online. It's never going to leak out. And not only that, but they actually can quickly authenticate users using SSO or other authentication protocols. That ensures that authentication gets out of the way to actually unlock all of your available and valuable content to you and your users that people need. Not only that, you can actually restrict access by department, seniority, and location, and more. Now, UStudio will make it easy for you to communicate effectively across your organization. In fact, each recording can be downloaded and listened to on demand, so your users can actually make most of their time that usually gets lost during their commute or traveling. Join companies like Salesforce, Nike, and Dell, who all trust UStudio to power their private podcast. Go to ustudio.com today to request your free trial or personalized demo, and be sure to mention you've heard about it from This Week in Enterprise Tech. That's the letter U, studio.com. And we thank UStudio for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Thomas Ginter from Bandwidth about emergency services, kind of some of the new laws around 911 routing and so on. You know, it's interesting. We actually had an interesting question from Victor, who is our TD for today, around some devices out there today, especially consumer devices. They have these emergency buttons on them, right? And those emergency buttons sometimes are getting routed to 911 services. Is this something that like, for instance, Bandwidth would help with, or a service would help with, that they're not doing it themselves, or actually routing through a special service for it?
Absolutely. So there's two use cases to really focus on, and that's where the person who's initiating device and the device are in a single location, and that's relatively simple because you're trying to get it to public safety in the same vicinity as where you are. The more complex is where you're doing what we call a call on behalf of scenario. And you mentioned Netgear and Netgear Arlo. Well, you could have your camera or your motion detector at your home, fly to another city, see something untoward on your camera and go, oh gosh, I need, it's a burglar or it's a fire. I need 911 assistance. And of course, if you've flown to another city and dial 911 on your smartphone, you're going to get the local constabulary who are not going to be able to render assistance to your house that's 1,500 miles away. And so what we do and what these services are about is being this broker between connect to us once and we connect to you to all of public safety across the nation, and we provide a intelligent routing service that's location based, where that IoT sensor is, whether it's a camera or a smoke detector. That's the nature of these evolving services in the IoT world.
Fantastic. I do want to bring my co-host back in. Cheever, I want to throw it over to you first. You've dealt with networks before. You've dealt with actually these emergency lines and so on. What are organizations worrying about?
Actually, my question is more about the small to medium-sized business where they have legacy multi-line phone systems. Like, for instance, I installed lots of Panasonic KXT systems, which is basically a 4-wire POTS variation. And those are hard-coded in the firmware to require dial 9 to get an outside line or punch a line button to get an outside line. Those aren't going to be compliant if I'm listening to this law right. So is this a dump and upgrade? Or are there even solutions for older key systems like that?
So I guess I have to throw a caveat out there. I'm not a lawyer, nor am I representing any kind of a legal position. But if you read the Act, Kari's Law and Raybaum's Act, it's as of February 16th, any system that is sold, installed, commissioned, upgraded even, I'm not sure if it says upgraded, but so these older systems that require a 9 to get out or that don't have dispatchable location provisioning capabilities, they are no longer allowed. And again, get those small to medium businesses to check with a telecommunications attorney. There are grandfathering rules for existing equipment, but anything that's new and sold, and in particular, if you're using a cloud-based service, it's assumed to be new. When I hop onto Facebook, I'm not hopping onto 2019's version of Facebook. I'm hopping onto the version that's being sold to me, if you will, today, which now must be compliant with law. I'm not saying Facebook does 911, but you get the cloud sample, cloud idea.
Well, like UMA. UMA's a pretty good example, right?
Yep. Sure.
So anyway, so let's scale this question up a little bit. Mm-hmm. What kinds of things can go wrong in an enterprise setting, a lot medium to large corporation, multi-floor and so forth? What kinds of things can go wrong with a 911 call?
So a couple of things. Number one is that there's no location information provisioned at all. You might be surprised to walk up to a conference room and pick up the Polycom or, dial 911 on the Polycom, and it goes to the cloud. Basically, it's not going to local public safety. It has to go to some sort of a call center that figures out where you are. So lack of information itself is one of the root causes of misdirected and misdialed 911 calls. And then there's people taking phones and inappropriately moving them between buildings. For example, hotel systems do this all the time. They've got conference rooms that you rent the phones, but they've got them provisioned to be in this conference room, not that one. They move the phones, and all of a sudden 911 that might happen at a wedding ball is in the wrong building or in the wrong conference room. So you have to be right on top of those provisioning changes. There are ways to automate this. There's some very good products out there to automate this, but these are the potholes that you have to see on the road to a successful 911 solution.
Last question along this line of thought. There's an awful lot of companies out there that have Wi-Fi based voice over IP handsets. Mm-hmm. Has enhanced 911 through Wi-Fi direction finding actually gotten any kind of traction that you've seen?
So yes, we have products in this area. I'll mention one that's not us that I'm aware of. So Cisco's emergency responder product, you can place in their Wi-Fi nodes, and as their Jabber clients wander around an enterprise, they will use that Wi-Fi location as the seed for the location information that then gets turned into this dispatchable information that I was referring to. So there's lots of good big brands out there who have solved this nut. Same thing, for example, with Microsoft Skype for Business. They're using this modern, what's called SIP PITA-flow technology, and also Microsoft Teams. We power that as well. So you go all the way into the cloud with Teams, and that 911 solution is now coming to us, for example, as a location on the fly, as opposed to a statically provisioned location that you have to be mindful of when someone moves their office.
Thanks, Thomas. Thank you so much for being here. We're running a little low on time, so we want to kind of give you a chance to maybe tell the folks at home where they can find more information about all of this, about bandwidth, how to get started, how to make sure their services that they're using, like you said, Teams and other services they're using, are actually using this type of service. Where can they go? Where they can get started?
Sure. I mean, bandwidth.com. That's it. It's a great name, Bandwidth. We've been around since 1999. We've got a full suite of voice, texting, and 911 services right there on our website. You can also email me if you want, tginter, TGINTER @bandwidth.com, and I'll put you into touch with the appropriate folks. 911 is not scary. It's just something that you need to learn and be comfortable with, and then we can assist you in all of your compliances.
Fantastic. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 package pirates. But I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially my co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, people love reading your stuff. Can you tell the folks at home where they can find you and all of your work?
Well, as always, I'm there on reading, and especially the edge of dark reading, where my larger features are going to be. Have a couple coming up. One of them is how to avoid, and even whether you can avoid, becoming collateral damage in the nation-state espionage and cyber attack environment that we find ourselves in right now. The other is going to be just as interesting. Ever thought about putting up a honeypot? I've got a piece on what they are and how to avoid having it turn around and sting you when you make them happen. Both of those will be going up on the edge of dark reading next week. Stop by, and if you're looking for a reminder, just follow my Twitter feed at KG4GWA. I'll let you know when those go live.
Thanks, Curtis, for being here. Of course, we have to thank our very own geek in paradise, Mr. Brian G. Cheebert. What do you have coming up next week, and how can the people get in touch with you and share their thoughts?
Well, I'm going to be throwing stuff about some new books that I just bought from No Starch Press on Python and how to use it to automate the boring stuff. The second edition of that book just came out, and I'll probably throw a nice book review on Twitter. And speaking of Twitter, I am ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab on Twitter. I am also Cheebert at twit.tv, but better yet, why don't you throw email at Twiet at twit.tv, and that'll hit all the hosts. And again, I'm going to be reading up because Python's cool, and I can do lots of really cool stuff, especially on Raspberry Pis.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cheebert. Well, folks, we have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise news each and every week. Now, all you have to do is go to our show page right now, twit.tv/Twiet. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, the show hosts, the show notes, the co-host information, the guest information, and actually the links to all the stories we do in the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you actually get those really helpful subscribe and download links. Now, support the show by getting your audio version, your video version, and your HD video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications as well. Now, it's really the best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT news each week. So go ahead and do that. And after you subscribe, impress your friends, your family, and your coworkers by sharing Twiet with them as well. Remember, we love doing this show, and by actually sharing Twit and Twiet with them, we can continue doing it. Now, if you already subscribed and you're available during the day at 1:30 p.m. Pacific on Friday, we do our show live at live.twit.tv. Come see how the show is run. Come see all the behind the scenes. Plus, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well also jump into our chat room live as well, irc.twit.tv. There we have all the characters that are out there, Chickenhead 21, Retcon, Riverbee Mike, Loquacious, all the kind of characters out there that give us weekly questions and comments, and they really kind of direct the show. They really make the show better, so we really want you to be part of it as well. So irc.twit.tv. Now, we love the chat room, but if you can't be part of the chat room, you can't be part of the live stream, you can always come back and still be part of the discussion. And how you do that? Well, twit.community. It's the new 24/7 discussion board where you can go and see what we talk about each show. We talk about technology out there. All the hosts are out there. A lot of the Twiet riots out there, the Twit armies out there. Just go out there, check it out, be part of the discussion. We know you're busy. You can't be part of the live streams and the live chat room, so go and check that out as well. Now, remember, you can always follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. There you'll see all my enterprise tidbits, of course, the conversations I have with good people like you. But, of course, I also post a little bit about my daily job at Microsoft, where we can actually talk about how Office can be more productive for you. You can even go to dev.office.com. There we can see all the latest and greatest ways you can customize your Office experience, actually enable you to make your Office more productive for you and your organization. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They're actually over in over in Las Vegas right now doing CES coverage, some really great stuff. So check that out. But they continue to support us each and every week doing This Week in Enterprise Tech, and we couldn't do it without them. I also want to thank all the engineers at Twit. Of course, I also thank Mr. Brian G. Cheebert. He's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. He does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we really couldn't do the show without them. So thanks again, Cheebert, for all of that. Now, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. Victor, you know, the spirit of tradition. It's a new year. What was the main theme of today's show?
I don't know about the theme, but I learned that I think we take 911 for granted, no matter where we're at.
I think we do as well. There's a lot hidden beneath there, right? A lot of abstraction. Well, I would say you're really close. I would say pay attention to the small print when you sign up for bandwidth for ISPs. But I would say you were really close. Maybe next time, sir.
All right.
All right. And until next time, I'm Louis Maresca. Just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.